Well, here it is. This is where it all starts. This is where LG OLED should be holding its hands over its crotch and crying because, yes, Quantum Dot OLED is coming in for that finishing blow. Now, specifically what we're taking a look at today is the Alienware AW3423DW, and this is widely held as being a fantastic monitor, but the question is it actually, or have we all been lied to? Well, let's find out. Now, we're going to blast through this one, guys. Right away, this is a 3440 by 1440, 175 hertz, 34-inch 21:9 Quantum Dot OLED gaming monitor, and yes, it does support G-Sync. I believe Ultimate actually, and I think it technically supports FreeSync, although you might have some trouble with Alt-tabbing, or at least I did. Now, in terms of a stand, it comes with one. It's pretty decent. If you want to know the ports, go ahead and pause the screen here. It has everything you need. It also does come with VESA mount compatibility, and at a price of around $1,100 roughly. Sometimes it's a little cheaper, sometimes a little more expensive. You know, it is fairly competitive, but is it good enough in today's market? Well, let's find out by first starting off with the color. And I will say, guys, that out of the box, it is pretty dang good. I think this is up there with some of the best, most vibrant OLED displays on the market. However, in terms of calibration, it's not perfect. It's pretty good, but it's a little off. So in terms of sRGB, honestly, guys, it is pretty dang good, although I was able to actually improve upon it further through a little bit of calibration as well as an ICC profile, which I will have linked in the description below in my Patreon, which also gets you access to the Discord, which I highly suggest taking a look at if you will be doing any editing on this monitor. But in HDR, it does have a little bit of trouble. Now, it's not horrible, but it's not quite where it should be either. I definitely had to mess around with some settings to get it to be a lot more accurate. Otherwise, games in HDR were completely blown out. But unfortunately, this does lead to, well, a little bit lower brightness. But in terms of the actual color volume, you can pause if you want to take a closer look. It is very good in both sRGB as well as HDR. So great stuff there. But what about the brightness? Very, very important for OLED. In a 100% window, it's kind of middle of the pack. It's not real impressive overall at 284 nits, but for an OLED, that is very good. For a 10% window, on the other hand, it is a little disappointing. I find 482 nits, 10% to be a little bit on the low side, even for OLED. But what about in a game? And here it's actually even more disappointing, as the brightest that I got after actually fixing the HDR was just 349 nits, which is not that great. Now, it can get much brighter if you're okay with completely blown out images, but for whatever reason, yeah, that's basically the best you're gonna get if you want it to look correct, which I assume most people do. But in terms of minimum brightness, you get 0 because it's OLED, which also means you do get infinite contrast ratio, so that's great there. There is no overclocking, but in terms of latency, it is a little bit disappointing here as well. 35.7 milliseconds. That's not actually that great. In fact, it's a little bit slower than a 165 hertz mini LED monitor, which I didn't consider to be, super fast. So this is definitely a little bit shocking. And if you're wanting to buy this for competitive gaming, it's probably the wrong choice, as there's other OLED options that are much, much faster. In fact, even the Samsung version is a few milliseconds faster at the same refresh rate. But what about the clarity in motion, the ghosting? Well, it's actually very, very good. This is a very big strength of OLED, and it shows at 175 hertz. It's nearly crystal clear, just beat out by 240 hertz OLED. At 120 hertz, it still looks pretty good, but of course at 60 hertz, it is a little bit blurry. Now, in terms of text clarity, it's okay. It's not that great. Unfortunately, it's not using a regular RGB layout. It definitely shows you can see some color fringing in terms of magenta as well as green on the edges of text, and it's also not 4K, so it's not like a super high resolution, so it's definitely more noticeable here, especially considering it's a first generation Quantum Dot OLED panel. But what about the finish? The finish I actually think is really, really good. It's got a really nice glossy finish, but it does have the downside of, if you do hit it with direct light, which I don't think you should do on any monitor, but if you do, it will get kind of a magenta tint, so that is one negative. And then in terms of viewing angles, Quantum Dot OLED is absolutely fantastic. Now, I didn't see any major issues with this overall, so I think Honestly, guys, as a quick review of this thing, since it has been out for a little while now and I don't want to waste your guys' time, I think it is really good, but it's starting to show its age a little bit. It's starting to not quite match up against stuff like the OLED G9, which that second generation panel just seems to be much, much better than this first generation panel. Of course, that's a lot more expensive, but it is an option that's kind of close in price. So honestly, for the price, is it worth it? I'm gonna say at $1,100, probably not. I think if you can find it under $999, it could be worth it. I think maybe looking at the AW3423DWF might be a better option, as I have seen those as low as like $800 or something, and that does, I believe, have lower latency, so that could be a really good option. But yeah, unless you find a deal on this one, I think it's just no longer worth the price at that steep $1,100. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, Rupro has you covered with their certified 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable, available in sizes of up to 50 feet and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K 60 FPS or 4K 144 FPS 10-bit HDR video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports ER. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out Rupro on Amazon today.